If we truly have an outage that is nationwide, that lasts 9 months, EMP Commission, which is a commission that was mandated by U.S. Congress, and it has much more authority and better funding than a congressional committee. They found that as many as 90% of Americans would die. So it really becomes almost zombie apocalypse.
That's right, if the power went out in America for just 9 months, 90% of the population would die. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, good thing that has a very low chance of happening, right? But unfortunately, you would be wrong. Because if you wanted to send America back to the Stone Age, all you'd have to do is take out 9 key substations and the US would go into a total blackout.
They ended up running a study, and they found that if there were as few as 9 critical substations were taken out, just key nodes, it could cause the power to go out nationwide in the United States.
9 substations.
That's right, just 9 substation transformers, and you will send America into absolute chaos. And here's the thing about these substation transformers.
How long would it take just to replace one of these gigantic transformers? In the documentary you guys talk about it, you show how big these transformers are. I mean, they would have to remove stoplights, maybe even remove some overpasses. I mean, this isn't just a delivery of a 6x6 box generator. These transformers are the size of buildings.
Right, exactly. They're hundreds of tons each, and therefore, how long would it take? If there were 3 or 4, they could probably get it done in a month or so. But if there are 50 or 200, then we're talking about chaos. We're talking about extreme chaos.
And if these substation transformers are this important to our very survival, one would think that they would be guarded 24/7, right? But no, they're not. Drive to your local substation right now and you'll see that the only protection these things have is a measly barbed wire fence. So you can bet that our enemies have our delicate power grid in their crosshairs. In fact, as you're about to see, these attacks have already been happening.
This is not calm. The Russians are already in the grid. This is not a threat. This is happening now. We are under attack.
Stay dangerous, and this is the coming collapse of the US power grid. While America's power grid is in shambles, these utility companies are currently rolling in tens of billions of dollars. And if you have a business that ships stuff, then you have to know about ShipStation. ShipStation is the shipping software that Joe Rogan's On It brand uses, and it's been a complete game changer for their business. It's allowed them to streamline their shipping so much that they're able to ship out over 500 orders an hour, which would have been pretty much impossible without ShipStation. So if ShipStation is good enough for Joe Rogan, it's probably good enough for your brand as well. That's because ShipStation is the fastest, most affordable way to ship products to your customers. All you gotta do is import your orders from all your selling channels, then you can accelerate your shipping with all their streamlining tools, while being able to access shipping discounts of up to 84%. And once you ship out an order, ShipStation will instantly update the tracking information to the selling channel and the customer. They've got over 130,000 merchants using ShipStation right now to save time and drive revenue. And the best part is that you can try it out for free for 60 days before committing. All you gotta do is go to shipstation.com/Jake with the link below to get your free 60-day trial. That's 2 months of faster, stress-free shipping at shipstation.com/Jake Tran with the link below. Thanks to ShipStation for sponsoring this video. It's 1:30 a.m. on April 16, 2023, or just 3 months ago from the time of recording this video. It was at this time when residents near a San Jose substation woke up to the sound of gunshots ringing through the night. For a full minute, gunmen opened fire on a Pacific Gas and Electric substation with over 100 rifle rounds.
So it seems that 8 or 9 terrorists were utilizing AK-47s or AR-15s and shooting out, the cooling, facility for these transformers. And fortunately, police got there, they disappeared into the night. They've never solved, who this was. Unfortunately, we were able to divert power such that it did not cause a massive outage in Silicon Valley, but it was frankly a wake-up call. And frankly, it was hidden for about a year until the Wall Street Journal ran a story a year later.
It was hidden.
Yes. The powers that be did not want the American public to understand that there might be terrorists out there taking out a substation. It's also possible that they didn't want this to create, Me Too attacks, other people saying, oh, we can do this. And therefore, potentially our powers that be have some reasons for, you and I both know, our authorities don't tell us the truth all the time.
This interview is from the Sean Ryan Show, by the way. Sean does some of the best interviews on the internet, on par with Joe Rogan in my opinion. I'm a big fan and I highly recommend you guys subscribe to his channel with the link below. And the single unsophisticated attack carried out by just a few guys brought down 17 substation transformers and caused around $15 million in damages. But that's not what was shocking. What was really terrifying is that they never got caught. Yes, these attackers are still roaming around to this day. In hindsight, the residents felt that yes, these substations should obviously be protected better. But hindsight is 2020. And the truth is that every single one of these vital substations around America are just as vulnerable to an attack like this right now as we speak. And indeed, the attacks are happening, you just don't hear about it. According to the Department of Energy, physical attacks on the grid rose by 77% in 2022. 77%. And just this year, Homeland Security released a report that, quote, domestic violent extremists have developed credible, specific plans to attack electricity infrastructure since at least 2020, identifying the electric grid as a particularly attractive target, end quote. And yet, for some reason, the government is doing everything they can to downplay these attacks. America's power grid is America's Achilles heel. And if you take a second to put yourself in the shoes of China or Russia, why wouldn't you have a plan to attack America's substations? Why wouldn't you be sending in sleeper agents through America's open borders just in case you decide to attack? After all, Russia did have sleeper agents in America as late as 2010 with the so-called illegals program. So why should we not assume that there aren't more sleeper agents in America right now, with an obvious target being the grid if they get activated? But here's the thing, is that Russia might not even have to go that extreme to attack the grid. December 23, 2015. It's just another regular afternoon in West Ukraine when something unexpected happens. A worker in an electric grid substation notices that his computer's cursor starts moving on its own. The cursor moves across his homepage, clicks on the station's breaker control panel, and then in an instant shuts down the entire substation. Nothing the worker tries to do can stop it, and no matter what the worker tries to do, he can't stop the attack or turn the station back on. And his substation wasn't the only one. Across Ukraine, Russian hackers shut down 60 substations in the span of just a few minutes. 230,000 people were left in the dark and cold. And even though the power was only shut down for a few hours, it took operators months to regain complete control of their substations. But this can never happen in America, right? America is the most modern and developed country in the world. Obviously, we have safeguards to protect against this sort of stuff. Well, not really. It turns out that the control systems for Ukraine's electric grid are actually more secure than many in America. So if the same attack happened in the US, it would actually take a lot longer for us to restore power, if we could even restore it at all. And worst of all, is that this attack on Ukraine looks like it was merely a testing ground for what Russia has in store for America.
They are using Ukraine as basically a testing ground on shutting power grids down using this malware.
We think that's certainly the case. About 2015, 2016, this is before the Ukrainian war, that there were 3 major cyber attacks against the Ukraine. And there was conjecture that, came from Ukrainians that said that we were probably the test case for this, about if our adversaries are currently in the grid and therefore could shut down our power grid. And she responded affirmatively. So there's something called malware or Trojan horse software, and essentially it could be, this malware can be laying in wait, latent, and ready to go, to be signaled. Senator Angus King, had a tirade in a congressional committee talking about this, saying that we're at war, that our adversaries are in the grid, And therefore, here we have two major public officials responding that this is a case right now.
There is no regulated protection to remove any of this malware or Trojan horse software that they're putting into these transformers. There's literally no oversight.
Ukraine is probably less sensitive than we are because they have less current technology and more analog technology and less digital electronics. And therefore that makes, them a little bit less vulnerable than our systems that are more digital and more advanced.
Russian malware is likely already inside America's power grid, which means the exact same thing that happened in Ukraine in 2015 could happen in America at a moment's notice. Except if Russia attacks America, it's gonna be a lot worse. But that is not our only threats. Because it's not just the Russians that are up in our power grid, it's also China as well.
China and Russia are working together. China produces 200 transformers. You said 9.
It's actually 300.
300.
Yeah, the number's 300.
300 transformers come from China.
What's really troubling, experts say, is that utilities have been buying some of these critical high-voltage transformers from China and putting them into our grid.
We knew about 300 large Chinese transformers that we had imported into the United States, and we knew that at least 200 of those were embedded in the electric grid. Why isn't there a requirement that somebody check to see whether it has some kind of a backdoor, some type of vulnerability? And there's no requirement that you check it.
Mike Mabey calculates that Chinese transformers now provide 10% of the electricity provided in New York City and 20% in Las Vegas.
It's very simple. China makes the cheapest transformers, and American utility companies can't resist the prospect of saving money. And while America banned Chinese telecom companies like Huawei, no one has even bothered to check to see if these Chinese transformers are compromised. Transformers that are very hard and expensive to replace. But here's the thing, even if China or Russia doesn't attack the grid, good old Mother Nature can.
We want to get to that disaster in Texas.
We certainly do. Michael, you and I have family down in Houston, and look at this neighborhood, still in darkness. More than 620,000 waking up without power in Texas this morning.
The concern right now are these rolling outages, these periodic blackouts that have been going into effect since early this morning. That leaves up to 2 million Texans without guaranteed warmth for what looks to be an incredibly frigid night ahead.
So nearly 3 million customers without power this morning. You're looking at live pictures from Dallas right now.
One of the worst power outages in America actually happened very recently in Texas in 2021. Over 4.5 million people lost power in the middle of an extreme snowstorm that caused generators all over the state to fail. For more than a week, residents across the state were stuck in freezing homes with no electricity or heating. And within just 4 days of the power going out, tap water in most of the affected cities became undrinkable because the water treatment plants all ran on grid electricity, which meant none of them could work. So unless you had some emergency water on hand, you became quickly screwed. Because just as quickly grocery store shelves were emptied, people's homes burnt down from them trying to make fires to keep themselves warm. And in hospitals, staff rushed to get life support systems up and running on backup power.
You start thinking about like crazy things, like whenever you're cold. I'm sitting there thinking about things that I can light on fire in my living room.
It was the first time I saw how fast established order could absolutely disintegrate.
It brings me tears to even think about it now, because I lost so much that I can't replace.
246 people died as a direct result of the storm and power outage, and researchers say that number is severely undercounted. And keep in mind, all this mayhem happened in around 10 days. Imagine if the power in your area went out for just 20 days or 30 days, and all it takes is a cold winter, a hot summer, a fire, or a flood to set it off. Just this year, it was warned that the US power grid is at risk due to extreme heat expected this summer. So who is going to take down the grid first? The Russians, the Chinese, domestic terrorists, or Mother Nature herself? And once the grid does go down, just exactly how bad will it get?
What would the catastrophic consequences be at a human level if you tried to live in a non-electricity world given the way we built our civilization?
9 out of 10 of us wouldn't make it if an attack on the grid resulted in the power going out and staying out for a year.
Well, after you get past the people who die from not having clean drinking water for a few weeks, then starvation would be the next big killer. Without modern irrigation and modern farming tools, there just wouldn't be enough food for everyone to survive. And although hospitals do have backup generators, they don't last forever. So millions of people would soon die from otherwise preventable diseases, and medicine, life-saving medication like insulin wouldn't last more than a few months. So when you look at it through this lens, 90% of Americans dying after just 9 months without power doesn't seem that far-fetched anymore.
So imagine what will happen if there is no food, no power, and no money and no transportation for 3 weeks, 3 months. Only people with guns and the boldness to go and take what they need to survive will live.
And here's the thing, the utility companies that control America's power grid knows this, and yet most of them aren't doing anything about it.
What's happened is there's mostly self-regulation in the electric utility industry, which means, so we call that regulatory capture, which means the utility industry has captured the regulators. There's FERC and NERC. So I mentioned Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and then NERC, North American Electricity, and both those entities, especially NERC, has 75% of their trustees come from the public utilities.
Because none of them are legally required to make upgrades to the grid or do anything to protect it from outside threats, these utility companies have been doing everything they can to avoid having to make any updates at all. That's because modernizing over 7,000 power plants and upgrading almost 160,000 miles of high voltage power lines is extremely expensive. It would cost at least $2.4 trillion just to keep the power grid running smoothly until 2050, which is a lot of money these companies don't want to spend. They're not going to spend their hard-earned money on fixing the power grid just in case something bad happens. Why lose out on billions of dollars now for something that's probably only going to be a problem when they're long dead? That is their thinking. And you would think that after the great toilet paper crisis of COVID, people would be more open to the idea of having some emergency food on hand, of maybe having some emergency water on hand, or some kind of emergency water filter like a Life Straw, not affiliated, or maybe even having a backup generator on hand with some extra fuel. But no, get any of these things and the average NPC will look at you with disgust. So if you needed that push to get any of these things, you definitely should. And if you want to do something to help fix this problem, this video was based on a free documentary called Grid Down Power Up, thanks to the Sean Ryan Show. And on their website, you can watch the documentary for free, and they allow you to contact your representatives with a click of a few buttons. It takes literally no work on your part, and you should definitely do it. So click the square on the screen to do it now, and click the card on the screen to watch the full Sean Ryan interview on this. Stay dangerous, and we'll see you in the next one.